The rain was falling in sheets that night, drumming against the hood of his jacket as he crossed the empty gas station parking lot. His boots splashed into shallow puddles, his breath visible in the cold night air. He had only stopped for gas, just another late drive after work, when he noticed her. A girl, no older than 20, crouched against the vending machine, soaked through, trembling as if the rain itself were swallowing her whole. Her hair clung to her face, her hands wrapped tight around her knees, and her wide, terrified eyes scanned the shadows as though someone, somewhere, was hunting her. He paused, unsure if approaching was the right thing. But then she looked up at him, her lips trembling, her whole body shivering from fear, not just the cold. He stepped closer, his voice low, careful not to startle her. "Are you okay?" he asked. Her answer, barely a whisper, carried more weight than thunder. "Not if they find me." And in that moment, everything changed. Before we go deeper into this emotional and suspenseful journey, I'd like to ask you, dear viewers, if you believe in kindness, in second chances, and in the power of standing by someone when they're most alone, please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Kindness Stories. Your support keeps these real and heart-touching stories alive. He could have walked away. It would have been easier. But something in her broken voice held him there. She wasn't just scared, she was running from something, something dark enough to make her hide in the rain, something dangerous enough that even speaking of it seemed to tighten her throat. He knew that kind of fear, he had seen it once before, years ago, in his younger sister's eyes when their father's rage had filled their home. Fear like that didn't come without reason. The girl's name was Emily. Her voice was thin, strained, when she finally told him. She had run away from people who weren't supposed to love her but claimed they did. A man who called himself her boyfriend but treated her like property. A group of friends who had locked her into a cycle of control, cruelty, and abuse. She had escaped just an hour earlier, when a shouting match turned into violence, and in that chaos, she slipped through the door and ran until her lungs ached. Now, hiding by the vending machine, she felt she had nowhere left to go. The man, Michael, hesitated. He was just an ordinary mechanic, tired from a long shift, barely keeping his own life together. His wife had left years ago, and he was raising his 8-year-old son, Daniel, alone. He didn't have the money or the time for someone else's problems. And yet, he couldn't shake the feeling that this moment was bigger than him. What if walking away meant sending her back into the arms of danger? What if this night was the only chance she had to be saved? He offered her a ride, knowing the storm wasn't safe, and she reluctantly followed, flinching at every sound. In the car, she kept glancing at the mirrors, terrified that headlights would appear behind them, that the people she had run from would find her. Her voice cracked as she confessed she had no family nearby, no money, no one to call. Everything she owned was still in that house she had fled. Michael drove in silence for a while, wrestling with his thoughts. He knew the risk, bringing a stranger into his life, especially around his son. But he also knew the truth of what his mother once told him: sometimes God places someone in your path not because you're ready, but because they are. And tonight, Emily had been placed in his path. When they reached his small house on the edge of town, Daniel was already asleep, curled on the couch with a blanket. Michael led Emily inside, offered her a towel, a hot drink, and a place to rest. She broke down then, sobbing into the cup of tea he handed her. It wasn't the tea she cried for, it was the rare taste of safety. The days that followed weren't easy. Emily's nightmares jolted her awake in the night, her hands shaking, her voice whispering apologies to people who weren't even there. She feared stepping outside, worried that someone would drag her back. Michael saw the fear etched into every movement, but he also saw flickers of resilience, a girl who had been hurt but not entirely broken. She helped around the house, cooking meals, folding laundry, even helping Daniel with his homework. Slowly, Daniel grew attached to her, his small voice calling her Miss Emily, his laughter returning in a way Michael hadn't heard in months. The house, once quiet and heavy with loneliness, began to feel alive again. But shadows don't stay hidden forever. One afternoon, Michael came home to find a black car idling across the street. Two men inside, smoking, watching. His stomach dropped. Emily froze when she saw the car too, her face draining of color. "It's them," she whispered. "They found me." Michael's first instinct was fear, but it quickly burned into resolve. He knew they couldn't stay hidden forever, but he also knew Emily deserved more than to spend her life running. That night, he called a lawyer friend, someone who had helped him with custody battles years ago. With his guidance, they reached out to the police, explaining everything, how Emily had been trapped, threatened, and now hunted. It was a risk. Emily shook as she gave her statement, but Michael held her hand steady. The following week was a blur of questions, paperwork, and protective orders. The men who had followed her were warned and investigated, though Emily remained afraid it wasn't enough. Through it all, Michael stayed by her side, even when he wondered if he was in too deep. The truth was, he couldn't step back anymore. He had seen too much of her pain to let her face it alone. And then came the moment that sealed everything. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the trees, Emily sat with Daniel in the backyard, teaching him how to plant little flower seeds into the soil. Michael watched from the porch, the laughter of his son mixing with Emily's softer smile. It struck him then, this wasn't just about saving her. It was about saving all of them. Daniel had found a friend, Emily had found a family, and Michael had found a purpose bigger than his own struggles. But Emily's journey wasn't over. Healing never happens overnight. She still carried scars, visible and invisible. Some mornings she stared at herself in the mirror as if searching for the girl she used to be. Some nights she cried silently, thinking no one heard. But Michael heard, and instead of words, he offered presence. Instead of solutions, he offered safety. Slowly, Emily began to reclaim her strength. She enrolled in night classes, determined to build a future that wasn't defined by fear. She found work at a small cafe, earning her own income, learning independence again. She began to laugh more, to dream again, though the fear never fully disappeared. It was a part of her now, but no longer the whole of her. And through all of it, Michael never left. Not once. He stood beside her, not as a savior, but as someone who understood that true kindness isn't about fixing someone, it's about walking with them until they can stand on their own. Dear viewers, if this story touched your heart, if you believe in kindness that protects, heals, and changes lives, I ask you from the bottom of my heart to please like, share, comment, and subscribe to Kindness Stories. Your support allows us to keep spreading light in a world that sometimes feels too dark. And before this story ends, I have a special request. If you were moved by Emily's courage, please comment below with the words, "Kindness can save a life." Let's fill the world with those words, so someone scrolling by might find hope in them. In the end, Emily wasn't just the girl who whispered, "Not if they find me." She became the woman who stood tall because someone asked if she was okay, and meant it. She wasn't defined by what she had run from, but by where she had run to, a place of safety, kindness, and second chances. And Michael, the man who had once thought he had nothing left to give, discovered that sometimes the greatest gift is simply opening your door to someone who needs it most. And perhaps that's the lesson for all of us, that kindness, even in the smallest act, can change the entire direction of someone's story.